You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Good evening, this is Force 13 Live. My name is Nathan Foy and we're here once again for another evening tracking what is going on across the Western Pacific, across the Eastern Pacific, well, the Central, I suppose, across everywhere. That's my other screen over there. I don't know why that's appearing on the screen, but you can just about make out the tracking map there. The update has just come out from the CPHC. 155 miles an hour at the latest update, 941 millibars the pressure, so they haven't gone with it for lane. It was really flirting with category 5 status, and let's get some instant reaction from everyone on board this evening. Strat, Caitlin, Hank, David, reactions on that please.
I'd say, you know, it's not quite there, it's pretty close. The latest recon pass just came through, and at flight level they were measuring 931.9 millibars, so it seems like the storm is still deepening a bit more. It's definitely flirting with it right now, but, you know, other people here will probably agree with me when I say it isn't right there yet.
I have to agree with you, Scrat. For one, satellite presentation isn't quite to par with, you know, what you would expect for a 140-knot storm. Observations are, again, just not quite there. Yes, they are seeing Cat 5 winds at the flight level. That's to be expected with these high-end Category 4s. So, really, if it doesn't hit, you know, Category 5 intensity on the dot, then don't be surprised at all. It could easily be another 155 Central Pacific storm like Hector was just 2 weeks ago, it felt like.
I believe we're also joined by Michael now as well. Good evening.
Good evening, guys.
You've been tracking lane very closely.
Yeah, it's just surprised me how it's just suddenly come back. Just made a massive comeback.
Yeah, indeed. David?
Well, it's another one for the books, and I've got to agree with what Hank and Strat have said, and at this point in time, would we be right to say a high range Cat 4?
Certainly, and it's been, you know, a very strong storm for the last 2 or 3 days now. Yeah, also on the screen you can see the other two systems. We've got Sulik and Cimarron. Sulik, which will become a significant threat to South Korea. There's preliminary typhoon warnings out there now as well. They will probably come into effect probably tomorrow. Cimarron is intensifying substantially by the looks of things, and I think they're going a little bit too conservative on that at the latest update, 105 miles per hour.
It's looking as though in the last frame, the seeming in the last.
Michael?
Yeah, looking at
Is that-
Simmer in it.
Easily.
I'm saying with Sulik, it looks as though in the latest frames that the ice sort of seemed to break up but then reconsolidate itself. So I don't know if that's another sign of intensification.
Well, you're talking about Sulik still.
Yeah.
Not sure if it will manage to intensify anymore. That would be something to behold, because it is rare that a storm can intensify further when it does get up there. Just to note, our poll this evening is about the Atlantic. Will it reach 12 total named storms this season whilst we're away from all of that? So Atlantic fans, if you want to send in your votes on that, visit our community tab on the Force 13 YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'll leave a link to that for everyone in just a second.
So, to reiterate, the Hurricane Watch in effect for Maui and Hawaii counties. That includes all of those islands leading up to but not including Oahu at this time, and we expect maybe some watches will come into place on Oahu later on tomorrow or later today. Who knows? If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, we're going to show you all kinds of things. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we'll do our best to oblige. In the meantime, let's see if we can get... Okay, here's an image of Lane. This is one of the most recent images of Lane right now on the infrared view, and you can see how the storm compares in terms of size in relation to Hawaii. As storms go, it's a fairly small one, isn't it? And it's been shrinking today.
That's usually to be seen with these sort of storms enter to the South Pacific. They're usually quite small, and that's normally because there's a lot less leeway for them to actually expand outwards, because you have a pretty dry and stable air mass around the islands. So really that just kind of subsides outwards activity from the storm. You can kind of see that with Hector. It really shrunk quite a bit, excuse me, once it moved into the Central Pacific. At a pretty similar size to Lane is right now. In fact, it's kind of similar in multiple different regards. But yeah, I guess this thing that I don't think will be that big of an issue for Hawaii, because once it gets up there, the shear direction will be out of the southwest, so all that convection will be moving over the islands and causing quite a bit of significant rainfall and, mudslides, flooding, and with all the activity going on near Kilauea, that's exactly what we do not need in that area.
But you think these hurricane watches are warranted?
I mean, if it's within the cone, within that distance of the center line, I guess. With the storm that should be that strong passing by, certainly there should be a hurricane watch.
Strat?
I'd like to bring something into notice in regards to recon right now.
You've been following recon closely earlier, and I don't know if you if you're able to screen share anything in regards to that.
Yeah, Isaac's also in the chat here. He is in the call, but he brought something to notice that I'll screen share quickly right here. Is that minimum sea level pressure in the latest passive flight level was measured to be 931.9 millibars, so probably a little bit higher at the surface, maybe 935 at maximum. So the storm's continuing to deepen. Something I noticed here looking at the SFMR wind speed, you have a suspect one at 150 knots. It's obviously not the case, but you have one here and one over here that are blue, so more accurate, that are both above 130 knots, which is potential indicator of the Category 5. It's really borderlining it right now. I'm really wanting to see what the drop zone information says in terms of pressure with the storm at the moment.
Be careful with observing those little things, because those are 10-second winds, and when determining the actual wind speed of the storm, we always use 1 minute sustained winds anywhere, basically to the... They might have, Category 5 winds, in terms of 10-second sustained winds, but in terms of 1 minute sustained winds, that's going to equate to a higher end Category 4. So 155 miles per hour is probably the most warranted moment. So we got to be careful when actually seeing that sort of stuff.
I think this question's going to come up tonight from some of our commenters, but I'm going to get in before them as long as no one's asked it already. you look at the pressure of this storm, 942 or 941 they're saying at the latest update officially, and it's on the verge of Category 5. People are going to make comparisons to Matthew. Does it compare?
Not
Lane-
really, no.
The thing with Lane is that it's at a pretty low latitude, and it's in a it's surrounded by high pressure right now. That's what's causing it that's what's steering it to the west, and that's why it's so far south, because the high pressure dome is just surrounding the storm. So when you have environmental pressures that high, your central pressure of the storm is going to be higher than what you normally expect for a 155-mile-an-hour storm in the Central Pacific. And admittedly, Hector, with its 936 millibar pressure, that was still even a little high. And that's because of the same reason. Is going to break down, which is why Lane is supposed to move towards the north and, eventually towards the Hawaiian Islands. That's because the ridge is breaking down and the eastern flank is going to become dominant. So it's going to get that northerly flow. And as it does so, the pressure may drop. So that's something you need to kind of watch out for, I guess. It's just pressure with these stronger storms might not exactly correlate to what you expect. Matthew was a kind of a similar scenario. Very, record low latitude for a Cat 5 in the Atlantic. High environmental pressures, all that fun stuff. So pressure is higher than you would expect it to be, I would assume.
Yes. What do we all think about its landfall sequence, as it may end up being? Will it weaken rapidly, as the models are saying, and is it going to be caused by the land mass, or, as you say, fully by the wind shear?
Well, it's kind of a tricky scenario. I could pull up a screen share really quickly. That would be helpful. Okay, so here's basically what I've noticed
to the model canvas here.
Yeah, so here's what's going on with the storm. So, in fact, actually, I'm gonna go to the 500 millibar. So it's kind of hard to see here, but we have a lot of kind of a weak, somewhat clockwise flow around the storm. So you can kind of see that. Let me see if this will help kind of display that. Yeah, you can kind of see it's kind of surrounded by ridging here. So as this kind of breaks down, you can kind of see the western flank kind of dissipates. So as the eastern portion becomes stronger, it's going to kind of propel the storm further north. And you can see that here in the model. Now the issue arises. The issue arises when if it gets close enough to the Big Island, and the model has some struggle actually maintaining the vortex moving in its proper direction. You can kind of see here, it's kind of hard to see. You can kind of see, this outer isobar kind of move up a little bit into the Big Island. That's because it's messing with the topography. So the model in this case is kind of pulling the storm a bit more inland, which you can see here. It's over the Big Island here. This is, Thursday night. So, and then it moves it eventually, towards the east. You can't really see it here, but it does move it towards the west again because it weakens and it becomes more reliant on the surface flow. So that's something that's kind of a issue with the models, is if it gets closer to the Big Island, it might try and trap it in. But in a solution like the European, in fact, let me see if I can switch this out again. A solution like the European, which was previously over land, and I've just noticed that it's not anymore. You can see it's a bit farther away, and it doesn't get entangled with the mass of the Big Island, so it just continues moving on in this general direction. But it does get weakened, and that's because there's still quite a bit of shear in the area. If we go back to the GFS initialization of 200 millibar winds, that'd be helpful to display it. You can see, if you load, you can see quite a bit of flow out of the southwest that's going to be shearing the storm in that general direction. So all the convection, whilst not maybe over the exact center, will be over the islands. And like mentioned earlier, that can cause a plethora of different problems, specifically mudslides and flooding from significant rainfall totals, especially if the lee side of the islands gets more rainfall. Then you're going to result in higher totals closer towards the actual center. And if that also occurs in your Kilauea, that just causes even more problems there.
All right. Well, now we're looking... I can hear myself in the background there from someone or other. I don't know. But this is what the Western Pacific looks like at this time. You can see the two typhoons here, Sulik and Cimarron. And Sulik, which with its massive eye and goodness knows how many eye walls now, or remnants of eye walls, as it moves towards the Korean peninsula, it's on its way. And Cimarron has been impressive today as well. Would anyone like to discuss that one?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. I have, you have the latest frames up there. It's pretty interesting to see how it's intensified because it isn't really in the most favorable conditions in terms of wind shear. It has a kind of a pocket that it's in a slightly favorable environment, but on almost every side of it, it's pretty high wind shear. So it's kind of found a nice little crevice to really intensify, you know, stronger than what the JTWC was initially saying. They say it's only 90 knots right now. It certainly looks like it's stronger than that at the moment and could intensify further.
Yeah.
So the threat for mainland Japan's definitely increasing with this system as it's
definitely
gone past the initial expectations.
Let's look into the storm right now. For just to probe the eye temperature, it's already plus 10 Celsius.
Someone has a question, like how we think Cimarron's eye might end up, like in terms of how big it might get.
Not as big as
I would
Sulik.
say that
Yeah.
Caitlin,
I
go
would
ahead.
say that the eye would be like fairly average because the storm has been. It might even be like a pinhole eye because it's been intensifying rather rapidly, and a pinhole eye is usually common in storms that have intensified.
It looks like it's
I
got
don't know about
bit
I
of
don't really
one.
know about a pinhole eye to be exact, because if it were to have a pinhole eye, it would have already formed one by now. You don't usually get eyes that contract a pinhole eye kind of sort of diameter unless it actually starts out with one of those. Even with eye roll placement cycles, the eye just gets, if anything, will get bigger and
So,
not,
Hank, how would
contract.
you describe the current eye that we're looking at?
Shoveled. It's from what it was earlier today. I mean, this morning it looked pretty junky. Now it looks, somewhat decent, and could help it continue to intensify is if the CDO, the central dense overcast, basically the cloud tops around the eye in the core, if those can kind of symmetrize a little bit about the eye and actually try and make the core more robust. And if that were to happen, then, one, that's worse news for Japan, and two, that would mean that the storm, that because it's worse news for Japan, it would be a stronger storm. So, eye on that, no pun intended, for the time being.
Okay, well that imagery is slightly glitchy. We will have a lot of questions to be taking shortly. Was that Michael?
Can I just interject something with? It's just I'm looking at Lane at the moment on I believe this is the sort of rainbow imagery from RAM, and it's looking in the latest frames with the banding around the core of the system, and then the eyes also consolidating itself. I don't know if the national, not the National Hurricane Center, the Central Pacific Hurricane Center have been somewhat conservative on that, because to me at the moment, I'm basing this purely on the satellite imagery that's being displayed. This is screaming at least 160 to me. So I would think that they've gone a bit too conservative on the system.
Interesting. Devon, who is one of our other people who always has an opinion on the satellite appearance of these storms, he, last time I saw, didn't think it was a Category 5. Any other opinions on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Michael, I would have to disagree. Current Dvorak estimations, I'm saying a very maximum of T6.8, which is about, plus or minus 35 knots, which is not quite up to Category 5 intensity. And even here, the official number I'm seeing is T6.5, and that's because the cloud cones actually surrounding the eye aren't, per se, or that very tall. And the actual eye, while, obviously well defined, is just not quite, warm enough or deep enough to actually be, sustainable for Category 5, and that is also kind of backed up by Recon, which is showing, a storm that is almost, but not quite to Category 5 intensity.
Yeah, I was gonna say, looking at the recon, I want to see the new drop zone, but it looks like it's continuing to deepen, but it's not quite there yet. It has a chance, but it isn't there yet.
I'm seeing is the lowest pressure I'm seeing at the 850 millibar level is about 932 millibars, so
yeah,
probably about 936, 937 at
which
the
is
surface if I would
still
have
lower
to.
than
Maybe.
the more recent drop zones.
So just looking at the comparisons to this year and last year, what do you guys sort of think's changed? So I've been watching both seasons, and it's just seeming that both basins have seemed to slow down somewhat in storm production. Because I think by this time last year we'd already had a number of systems.
The West Pacific hasn't.
And we might get another one in the Western Pacific. 92W has been designated now.
92W. Where's that one?
It's southwest of Taiwan right now.
Between the Philippines and Taiwan.
Pretty disorganized. Not expected to develop soon, but models are picking up on it developing. The GFS is especially keen on it.
Interesting place for one.
They say it's gonna be kind of a weaker system, not a typhoon strength, but at least tropical storm intensity.
Every other storm this season, but besides a handful of like 3.
But they develop it in a similar area where Rumbia was as another broad system, and then bring it into the East China Sea, and then pull it northeastward towards South Korea as it weakens.
I've just been trying these last few minutes to get some models up on the some of the. I know it's a little bit. I don't know about showing them, but the HWIF and HMON do the simulated radar for Lane, and I thought that might be interesting to show people what maybe one of the worser case scenarios might look like. But we'll get onto that shortly.
Yeah, showing some pictures of those earlier today in a couple of chat rooms.
We'll get onto that shortly because I don't know whether it's the web page that's struggling or whether this internet connection here is struggling or not. But hopefully we're doing okay. What you can see on the screen right now is the latest forecast graphic from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center of Typhoon Sulik. And on the left there, the chances of storm conditions go scrolling by every once in a while. 57% in Seoul, the capital of South Korea. Percentages just about creeping into the 90s in the southwestern tip of South Korea. And along the western Japanese coast of the island of Kyushu. Those percentages also elevated there as well. That's for tropical storm conditions. Do you think the forecast track for Sulik is pretty much assured now?
Yeah, look pretty intact, I would assume.
Yeah. Although it's interesting to note, it's continued to shift westward. Yesterday, as we streamed the JTWC tracks hit a landfall on Daeju Island, but now it shows it being further west than that. So
I think was it saying that last night or maybe a little bit earlier today?
It was saying over the eastern half of Jeju Island yesterday when we were streaming. So, I don't know, if you look at trends, it could move it still a bit further west than forecast, but probably not that much at this point.
It's really not that much more leeway time for it. I mean, the ridge to the east is pretty...
It's nearly there already.
It's getting there pretty quick. And
200 and something miles.
Yeah, and even with that, you gotta, I guess the other thing you gotta, when considering Sulik steering into Korea is Cimarron, when it, Japan, whatever island that is, the one between Honshu and Kyushu.
Shikoku.
Forget the name.
The possible landfall location for Cimarron, yes.
I'd say the fortunate thing with Cimarron is that even though it's intensified more than expected, it's still going to be moving pretty quickly, so the worst conditions won't really stay around very long. If you look at the JTWC track, they have it gone from there within a day or so.
Still plenty of time.
Yeah, but I mean, it could be moving even slower than it is as it
and
gets
there's the percentage
Japan.
chances there on your screen as well. 85% chance of tropical storm conditions in Osaka, which is a massive city in the central part of Japan.
It's just as it approaches the mainland islands, it's going to start to accelerate, especially as it moves through them, going towards days 3 to 4.
Right, and that's where kind of the track of Sulik also becomes a bit, hairy. It depends on how close both these systems get. And while, yes, both of them will be weakening and more of a post-tropical transition, if Cimarron can get a bit farther towards the west, if the ridge to the east of Japan is a bit stronger, then it could potentially kind of offset Sulik's trek a bit farther to the west potentially might not move into southern South Korea, but may move into the northern part of South Korea, maybe near Seoul or along the 38th parallel with North Korea. So it's very situational here, and it really all depends on Cimarron's speed and obviously Sulik's speed as well, but also B, how strong Cimarron is when it comes into contact with Japan, because by that point they'll be basically at the same latitude. Interaction that would undergo there would obviously throw off that Sulik goes anywhere between farther north, farther south. It just depends on Cimarron's exact parameters at the point.
All right.
Can I interject with something interesting that I've just noted on the satellite imagery? Is that I've been looking at the latest 2 to 3 frames, which have come at 2000 Zulu, 2020, 2030, and 2050. The latest frames looks as though that the western spiral bands of I think it is Cimarron is seeming to be they seem to be collapsing, and it looks as though that the two systems could be starting to engage.
Really?
In a Fujiwara effect.
They're too far apart for that to happen right now.
But it's looking as though, because the outflow from Sulik is affecting Cimarron.
Here is the latest imagery close-up of Cimarron right now, up to 850 UTC. You can definitely see that the eye is still a little bit ragged, but a very strong eye wall or blow-up developing, circling the storm really as it goes along, as it's moving towards the northwest there. The eye is still... Is it deepening? Let's see what that latest eye temperature is. It was 10 degrees Celsius earlier. It's now 13 Celsius. A warmer eye denotes a stronger storm, and there it is in relation to Sulik. They don't look together at all, really. There's a significant gulf between them, and I'm guessing that might be a bit of a dry air slot. There's the water vapor imagery that we're looking at there too.
Nathan,
anti-cyclones are both pretty well spread, and I mean Sulik's is a lot bigger than Cimarron's, because Cimarron's is a lot younger as well.
All right, David.
Interaction will be likely.
The Joint Typhoon Warning Center advisory indicates that Sulu has gone from a 40 nautical mile eye, I think we mentioned 45 yesterday, is now out to 60.
But yesterday you could have argued that the eye was as large as, was it 92? If you measured it in one particular direction, but 60 was a good number for yesterday. Right now I'd say it's actually smaller than it was at one point yesterday, and much more ragged. I just want to bring to the viewers the latest forecast map, if you've not seen it yet, for Hurricane Lane. This came out less than half an hour ago from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, and if I'm not mistaken guys, it's closer to the islands yet again, very nearly a landfall if you follow the line, but we don't want you to follow the line because the cone is what matters when we're looking at this. The center of the storm could pass anywhere within that 5-day cone.
I mean, what it looks like the models compared to the last one, much less of the big island is in the cone now, but that's because the track is slightly more certain. It looks like the tracks moved slightly north and east, but not by very much. And speaking of Lane, the drop zone information came back, and Lane is down from 942 millibars to 936 millibars.
Wow.
So still at the moment.
Impressive.
So that basically times Lane for the strongest storm so far this season. Both Lane and Hector had 135 knot winds and a pressure of 936 millibars.
Yeah, and it
How
looks
uncanny.
like that was the last recon pass for now. It looks like the plane's heading out of the storm for the moment at least. They're probably gonna send in another one later tonight.
If I can find a more in-depth recon data, because I'm interested to see how fast the winds were within that drop zone. It seemed to be a little bit farther outside the exact center, so I'm gonna try and see if I can find that really quickly, because I think that would probably.
I'm just sending a screen share into the
Is this what we're looking at now, Cimarron?
Yeah. No. This is Cimarron. So if you can see off to the top left, you've got Sulik.
Michael's still trying to prove that point of his there.
But it's just.
I don't think you're going to get it.
You can see in the last frames. It's just in the last frames. It just seems to be that the western side is seeming to collapse.
I still think it's trying to solidify. That's been the weakest side for the last hours or so. I think it's still just trying to get its act together there, really.
And Cimarron, according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre, has a 10 nautical mile eye.
Fairly small.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll argue about that for a little while.
We should also mention, Nathan, Joint Typhoon Warning Centre has Invest 92W. Low percentages for deepening, and that's another one to keep an eye on.
All right, I want to show everyone these graphics before people get confused. Hopefully we don't. You can see all these lines here. They denote all the different models on these particular charts. I like looking at these charts because it tells you all you need to know in one image. So starting at the top left panel there, you can see the intensity forecast. This is for Sulik first of all. Pretty much all the models there calling for a gradual decrease in intensity. That's pretty assured. Wind shear is going to be on the rise. Sea surface temperatures are going to slowly drop a little bit, but should stay warm enough all the way up until landfall. And relative humidity will rise a little bit. And then the track in the bottom left hand panel, the biggest panel of them all, showing where the storm's expected to go. Pretty clear up until landfall, but now the HWRF takes it for a ride halfway into China and then back out towards the east towards Hokkaido, Japan. So that's a pretty interesting anomaly, but apart from that, it's not too much to talk about in relation to that. We know what's going to happen, and now everyone has to prepare, particularly in southwestern South Korea. This is Cimarron. It's almost a similar story with that, because it's looking pretty likely that the storm's going to impact the eastern side of Shikoku and the south central part of Honshu, just west of Osaka. Now, the top wind speed according to those models, JTWC actually higher than any of those models from this graphic at least. I don't know if there's any other models like the ECMWF that may have called for something stronger, but the CTCX is the highest of those, having a borderline category 2 and 3. We argue it's already there now, so I don't think we can really listen to any of those models, and I think it's certain that it's going to get to category 3 at least. Wind shear though will be on an increase. HWRF doesn't appear to be picking up the sea surface temperatures at all, saying it will drop to 22 degrees in the next 12 hours. I don't think so. So I don't know what's going on with the models on that one. And then for Lane, this is probably the most curious one, and the one that will keep us guessing for the longest. I mean, look at this. I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen, but the tracks between these models, if you're watching from Hawaii right now, this is going to put you in a right muddle, because you got the CTCX furthest south there, keeping it well away from the islands, but making it a category 5. And then you've got the GFS, which has it hugging the western coast of the big island and then moving away, and not too far away from the other central islands there, but generally moving away, but keeping it pretty weak as well, category 1 around that area. Then you've got the HMON, which is swinging it up towards and actually making landfall on Oahu there, possibly as a category 3, maybe a 2, maybe weakening substantially by then, but you never know. And then moving out towards the west. Then you've got the HWRF, which is swinging it by very close to the big island and then onto the easternmost island, that's Maui I believe, and then off towards the west, and possibly also a landfall on Oahu before jogging north and then back west, possibly striking Kauai as well. That'll be the first storm ever to strike all of them islands, I think. But what they all agree on those models is that wind shear is going to go through the roof in about 2 days' time.
It also looks like the HWR briefly has Lane becoming a Category 5 as well.
Huh. Yes, it does. And the HMON. They all agreed on that earlier today.
Yeah, really quickly, I just kind of want to butt in really quickly, kind of on topic with Lane. I did find the actual wind speed that was recorded with the drop zone, and it was about 10 knots from the east-southeast, so about 12 miles per hour. And so that would mean that the actual minimum central pressure would probably be closer to 934 millibars, I would assume. So, yeah, I guess that kind of puts into context how much it's kind of strengthening in the past, while, I guess.
So we're here to talk about all three of these systems. You'll forgive us for jumping around from one storm to another as we get news on all of them as we go about here. Sulik and Cimarron both officially Category 2. And now we're looking at Lane, which is just shy of Category 5 status. I saw one or two comments earlier saying that the CPHC should go and issue an update and make it a Cat 5.
I mean, if we had another drop zone come in, which isn't going to happen right now. Oh, wait, no, the plane's actually going in for another pass, so we might get another drop zone. I just assumed it was going out. It isn't. If we get another drop zone and it deepens by another 3 or 4 millibars, you could argue that, but not right now, at least.
Okay.
We got a question.
I was just going to take some questions. You go first.
I'm always looking through the chat. We got a question from someone asking, is it surprising that 2018 EPAC Ace has outdone 2017 already?
No, not to me at all, because this season has been a lot more favorable as a whole than 2017 really ever was, because 1, the Enzo is warmer, 2, the Pacific Meridional mode is a lot more vigorous, and 3, there's just a lot more rising motion just centered over the basin. Really, July 2017 just took up all of the convective energy of the season, and then the rest of the season in 2017 in the Eastern Pacific was pretty dull and pretty lackluster. And it's kind of the opposite here. We had a pretty active June, pretty dead July, and then a really roaring August so far. And
Really?
who's to say that we'll continue into September? We might get a little bit of a lull briefly, but I mean, in terms of, ACE values are literally double what we saw from this time last year, I believe. They're, I think almost 130 now for the Eastern Pacific. You usually see about 135 per season. So, and it's August, 21st now?
Yep.
So, it's been a pretty remarkable season, in my opinion, so far.
Would you say that if 2017 didn't have much of its Atlantic activity, that it would have been a really quiet worldwide season?
Oh, for sure. Like, the Atlantic was the only basin really last year that was above average. Like, the Western Pacific was really, shut down. So was the Eastern Pacific, especially later in the late season, because, La Nina got rolling. 2017 in the Southern Hemisphere was a complete nutter dud. And really, the Atlantic was the only basin last year that really had a lot of activity. Now, that's, normal. Whenever your Pacific seasons are quieter, the Atlantic usually is a lot busier. Case in point, 2010, hyperactive season in the Atlantic, record inactive in in the Pacific as a whole. And then, I forget what the Southern Hemisphere was like, but bottom line, when the Pacific is quiet, the Atlantic is usually pretty busy.
Michael?
There seems to be some sort of oscillation between the two basins. So looking back over the last, including this year, as well as last year and 2016.
I just want to put something to you, actually, though.
Yeah.
You were talking about La Nina there, Hank, and this year, wouldn't it be something you'd have expected to have seen a little bit more with an El Nino? And where are we with that right now?
Right now, we're about the anomalies. It depends on what method you use. When you use the CDAS method, which is satellite-based, you have about anomalies of about 0.2 degrees Celsius above average. But when you use the Reynolds method and the OSPO method, you have a little bit higher, but not quite the El Nino threshold. Now the entire Western Pacific is really active because, well, for one, we're having a bunch of junky storms in the Western Pacific, but that's a different topic. And two, the MJO has just been really favorable through the Pacific as a whole, all throughout, through July, into August now, and there's just been really suppressed around it. So in the Indian Ocean and Atlantic Ocean, it's been pretty suppressed, especially around the tropical region. So that's why, I guess, in the Atlantic we've had more subtropical activity, a little bit too much. But then you can see in the Pacific, you've had, we just had literally the ACE values in the Pacific combined right now are just over 250. Which is remarkable for this time of year. Like, it's double what it should be in the East Pack. It's a good margin above what it should be in the West Pack. And, I mean, yeah, sure, most of that's from Hector and Maria, whatever. And now Lena, actually. And I guess you could say Stulik and Shan to a lesser extent. But bottom line is that it's been really, just MJO has just been really favorable for just rising convective motion across the Pacific as a whole in the past several months, really.
We're also joined by Isaac at this time.
Yeah, I saw a question in the chat regarding El Nino. I think it's interesting to note that there's, over the past couple of weeks, there's been a pretty sudden reversal in the ENSO. A lot of the equatorial Eastern Pacific anomalies are actually below average now compared to just a couple of weeks ago, where they were above average. So I know we were talking about this, last week, like in private, just on an off-topic call that we were having. But, a lot of people were tweeting saying, certain areas will be inactive because there'll be high wind shear in this area because, models are saying warmer sea surface temperatures for that time. But right now, the anomalies are pretty low in the Eastern Pacific. I'm actually showing that right now on this graphic right here.
Oh, just a minute. Let me just get to that. Can take me a little while.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if this has been touched on yet. I'm sorry if I'm accidentally interrupting people because my connection's pretty bad here. But the last recon pass has confirmed a 936 millibar recon drops on from Lane. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's been deepening more.
Yeah. So, Strat, the thing about your graphic is that you're going to have those sort of oscillations like that because the subsurface Kelvin wave isn't exactly perfect. You're going to get these little, you're going to get these little sort of, below average anomalies that pop up, here and there occasionally. That right there happens to be a bit stronger than you would normally expect, but really, that's just kind of a wave that'll progress westward. Those cooler anomalies will progress westward ever so slowly as, the great winds kind of progress. So you could easily have a much stronger low burst come up in the the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific and really kind of overshadow that. So you're going to have these sort of what do you call them? These little ripples, I guess, of lower anomalies, higher anomalies. That's normal. So to see it kind of bounce up and down like this so erratically, nothing unusual.
Can I put in something as well, actually, about so going back to the discussion about the sort of trends, shall we say, with the Atlantic and Pacific in regards to their activities. It's interesting to note that in the last 4 to 5 years, there has been a general trend, really, where there's been this, as I say, a sort of oscillation between the two basins. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this as well. So I'm looking back as far as 2013. So in the North Atlantic during 2013, we managed to see only 15 systems in the Atlantic, of which the strongest was Hurricane Humberto, a very measly Category 1 storm, which only topped out at 90 miles per hour. And then you had over in the East Pacific, although it was a weaker season, there were 21 storms and also one major hurricane. So which then that sort of generally partially does back up the theory that there is a sort of oscillation between the two seasons, although in 2013 that hypothesis is a bit weaker because of the general strength of storms back in 2013. But then taking the attention to 2014 being a rather quiet season, and again very weak storms in the Atlantic. But looking over to the East Pacific, we had storms like Hurricanes Amanda and Christina, both very strong Category 4s, quickly then followed by many more major hurricanes, and in the end that season ended up with a total of a record high 16 hurricanes and 9 major hurricanes, which was a very, very active season for the East Pacific. And
what kind of essay is this?
But it's explaining the hypothesis between the two basins. So, like, looking at this year, it's been a very, very active and very strong season in the East Pacific. So already having 4 Category 4 hurricanes, and then looking over to the Atlantic, our strongest being a Category 2 Hurricane Chris, and only 5 systems actually having formed. It's a high.
I mean, the thing about it is that, you know, the Atlantic is still above average right now. Barely, but it is. 5 named storms by, you know, August 21st is quite a bit above normal. I mean, 2 hurricanes is also, you know, even more above normal, really.
Let me just cut to this. David, where are we looking at here? Is that David showing us that?
Sorry, Hokkaido, Japan.
Hokkaido.
Yep, one of the airports.
That's way up north, David.
Ah, alright. Well, that's just a snapshot.
Well, there's a snapshot.
You can see the cloud actually closing in.
Yes, but that's nothing to do with the typhoon.
Yeah, well, I'm searching. So we'll go to Nagasaki.
Someone
Good
asked
idea.
if we think Lane will weaken in the near future. It's likely it's going to start encountering less favorable conditions. Although right now it's been surprising us. It was initially expected to start weakening a day ago or earlier today as well, and it still hasn't really done that. So, I mean, we do assume it's going to be entering a weakening trend by midday tomorrow, I would assume. By that point onwards, it's going to really start weakening. So if it's going to peak, it probably has the next 6 to 12 hours to do it.
There's been a question from James Summers about asking when will the Atlantic start firing up?
Good question.
Probably early September. I would assume it would be early September because that's really when the convectively coupled Kelvin waves really start to roll in, and the MJO becomes more favorable because, you know, you're going to have more sinking motion in general over the Pacific. Now, in the long-range models aren't really showing too much, but that's also considering that the long-range models don't really extend out into September, which, you know, the latter half of September is likely to be a lot more active because longer-range, you know, weekly models like the CFS are showing that, at least of what I've seen, a lot wetter anomalies throughout the main development region, kind of as a whole, and as well as the Mexico and, you know, the subtropical Atlantic. So who's to say we could see, you know, quite a few more named storms during that time frame. Now, I think, this is just my opinion, but late September, early October is the time we're going to have to really watch out for land impacts, specifically to the United States, because we might get some more homegrown storms coming in, and that could fire up pretty quick. Or we could see something like, say, or like Isidore of 2002 or Lily of 2002, really, like 2002.
Oh, no.
And something like that could happen.
I do agree, though.
Yeah, that's what I feel is a likely solution to if we get an impactful storm, it would likely be, I guess, something like that. And maybe, I know you're going to hate me for saying this, maybe something like Joaquin. That's possible.
Oh my
I
god.
would say, though, speaking of the long-term models, GFS goes out to 16 days, and it's almost completely conspiracy just because all the way out there. So it's definitely not reliable. But in terms of picking up activity, the GFS at the end of its 12Z run, 16Z isn't fully out yet.
Strat, you speculating.
I'm just looking as well, actually,
I
at the
claimed it was
Atlantic.
conspiracy before I said it.
I'm just looking at the Atlantic from last year, and actually to add to the answer towards James Summers about when the Atlantic might fire up, it was about this time last year is when Harvey was starting to gather pace.
Really?
It was about this time last year that Harvey was starting to gather pace, which I know each season is different, but looking at the trends, it is about this time of year
But it's
when
not
the
going to happen
storms really
this year.
start. It shouldn't do, but it's when the stuff starts to pick up. Although this year, from what the Atlantic has produced so far, and also looking towards the next 5 to 10 days, nothing's looking likely to form. But it's something to take into account that something could start happening, but not on as a destructive scale as we saw last year.
Yeah, definitely not. Something like last year is very unlikely, especially considering that the Atlantic is a lot less conducive for powerful hurricanes like we saw last year. I mean, Michael just said, Harvey was this time last year while the eclipse was going on. Actually, this day last year, Harvey was a really vigorous tropical wave in the Western Caribbean.
Not quite.
Sorry, I'm tired. And then 4 days later, hit Texas coast to Cat 4. But we also had the beginnings of Irma happening about right now with the wave forming over Africa.
31st in the end when it formed.
Yep.
Yeah, and the thing is that if we look over Africa right now, we don't have waves as vigorous as we had last year. And you look at the tropical Atlantic, we have one thing in the tropical Atlantic: dust. That's it.
Yeah, and we've noticed that from the very beginning of this season, haven't we?
Oh yeah, the Saharan air layer has been a lot stronger than it usually is, and that's mainly due to a wetter African monsoon, which amplified. This can be a bit more technical. Amplified the East African jets, or the African easterly jet, excuse me, that is pumping all this really dry, dusty Saharan air.
Yeah, and I'll screen share that right now. Here's the
all over the
animation.
tropical Atlantic.
Before we get to that, David, what are we looking at now?
The main gate to the University in Nagasaki.
All right, we'll leave that open for a few minutes. Strat?
Yeah, I was gonna say I had the animations of Saharan air layer.
We'll go to that.
Yeah,
show.
that's extremely
And
prevalent.
right now it's still reaching all the way towards the Western Caribbean. We have a lot of dry air.
Was
right
that
now.
Orlando in the background? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've been trying to sneak my way in since probably 15 minutes ago, but I'm
I
here.
didn't even notice you were here.
Sorry about that. Well, welcome. Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine. I was basically losing it a couple, maybe 30 minutes ago when I saw that Lane was not weakening as I was predicting it would. So yeah, that's I guess that's like the most interesting yet and also most surprising thing that's happened today so far.
You're looking at webcam in Nagasaki right now, looking pretty quiet. Michael.
There's one thing I'm hoping that's going to happen in the Atlantic, and I think you know what it is.
Oh, I wonder.
I'm hoping for 8 more named storms.
Oh.
No, this is just ludicrous.
I know it's just I want Michael to make a comeback.
Oh my god, you're kidding me.
Yep, Michael.
It's just gonna be 40 miles per hour for one advisory, then afterwards just dissipate.
It probably will, to be honest. It's although the 2012 one was a nice surprise, but it stayed out to sea. It's fine. I'm fine with the storms as long as it stayed out to sea.
Force 13 did updates on it. Indeed.
Yeah, I mean,
a long time ago.
Hank?
We could see 11, 12 storms, considering we've had a bunch of subtropical junk storms. As in terms of actual.
Oh, all right then. How about this poll, Hank? Just to interrupt you briefly to let you answer the question again shortly. We've put out the poll on the community page. You can go there right now. There's been 82 votes so far. 70% think we will get to 12 named storms this season. 30% say no. Hank, which are you?
I'd say I'm going to be a bit of a annoyance, and I'm going to say 11.
No!
Because Ernesto, those were kind of junk storms, I guess, and we probably would have gotten 4 name storms by this point, if that. So if we get to Leslie, then okay, or if we get to Michael, then okay. But I'm gonna bank on getting to 11 name storms, so slightly below average in that term.
All right then, we'll take comments on that. In fact, let's just see what other people have been saying. Well, first of all, what does everyone else in the room think about that?
I say 12. Something around average. Maybe slightly, maybe surprisingly, maybe slightly above or slightly below is somewhere in that range. I'm just at the median right now.
Strat?
I'd stay in agreement with Hank. Probably just right about average, maybe slightly below. Unless conditions change significantly within the next couple of weeks with the Saharan air, though, that's when we see main development region storms that they don't really fire up. We're not really gonna get up to the point where we have an about average season. But like we were talking about, watching the Northwest Atlantic in the late season is going to be important.
Here's what the others think. Some other people think right now. Norway tracking says yes, and he thinks it will soar well past that. In fact, 14 to 17 is their prediction. That Canadian Manetric says yes. Tina Werrell says yes. It's getting real close to the active part of the season. Yes, we've already had 5 and it's late August, so I can see 7 more forming. Yes, conditions look to improve considerably in September, and if it can last through October, I can see at least 12 nameable storms. A lot of yeses on the comments, and 1 or 2 no's. Dragon Rider 75, I think the Atlantic will have some activity as we still haven't reached September 10th, but with Noah now predicting a below average season and the SST anomaly being below average, he's doubtful about the Atlantic having 12 storms. JNLT215 also says no, the conditions are way too harsh. We're taking a short break now. We'll be back in a few moments' time with more coverage on the latest typhoon and hurricane situation. To reiterate the warnings right now, a typhoon warning is in effect for parts of Japan, the Amami Islands, the western coast of Kyushu, and a preliminary typhoon warning in effect for parts of South Korea. For Cimarron, the warnings that were on the Mariana Islands earlier have been lifted. They will probably come into effect for Japan later, Shikoku in particular. And for Lane, there's a hurricane watch in effect for part of the Hawaiian Islands, extending up to but not including Oahu. They'll probably be extended later on in the next 24 hours or so. Back shortly, stay tuned. This is Force 13 Live. Continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website force13.com, our YouTube page, youtube.com/Force13, on Facebook under the same name, Force13, and our Twitter handle, it's @Force13 if you wish to get in touch. You can also add Force13 on Skype and my personal account on Discord, Fool13, at extension 9094. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Hour 2 of Force 13 Live. It's just reached 10 PM UTC this August 21st. That's the Universal Time. In Japan and Korea, it has just reached 7 in the morning. And in Hawaii, it is 12 noon. This is the latest picture. You can see everything that's going on right now. The 2 Typhoons on the left-hand side, and you just about make out that Invest 92W to the left. Just off to the right there it is, Hurricane Lane. Very close to the Hawaiian Islands. You can see all 3 systems there. It's a very busy time. We've got all 3 of them threatening land areas. Some of them very menacing indeed. And obviously we're watching it extremely closely, and we're thankful to have you with us for this next hour. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by the team in this hour, consisting of Orlando, Strat, Isaac, David, and Michael.
Good to be here for the second hour.
And we are looking at, again, imagery there just to see what it's looking like in Nagasaki, which is not too far away from the edge of the storm, but it hasn't really arrived there yet by the looks of things.
What did you say, Nathan, in your opening the text 202 nautical mile or nautical miles away?
What did it say? Good question.
Sorry, got you. I put you on the spot.
Yes,
I think it
you're
was
right.
202.
202. Yes. So that's how far the centre of Sulik's eye is away from pretty much that location there. Interesting. Thanks for showing us that, and if anything changes, I'm sure you'll let us know. Michael's showing us imagery from RAM of Lane. We've not seen this imagery yet, so we can show it now. Do you want to tell us about it, Michael?
So looking at the latest frames from that imagery, it's looking like at the moment that it's banding a bit more in the latest frames. So I don't know if this is. I think it is still intensifying, and I personally do think the next update could have 140 knots plus. I think possibly with this system it is inevitable, because it still looks like it's strengthening.
You're saying it's inevitable?
It's still from the last update an hour ago. It's still looking like it's intensifying. There's not much holding it back.
Well, let's look at this imagery and see whether.
It depends on the next recon pass, really. It still shows it. It showed it deepening at the last pass at 936, although that was just slightly out of where the lowest pressure could have been. So
Let's see what the latest eye temperature is, if we can go and grab that briefly. The eye temperature is now actually 17.
So still warming. And not just that, but it really depends on the next recon pass. You know, if the storm's still deepening at that point, it could reach Category 5 status. But like we've been saying for the past hour, really, it's kind of teetering on the edge. It's still deepening, but we don't really have confirmation nor denial at this point, so we're really just assuming it isn't.
What would you say if SATOPS right now, the satellite method that we use quite often, says Category 5?
I mean, based on the storm continuing to deepen, I would support it for the most part, really. You know,
well, it doesn't. 152 miles an hour is the latest from our estimates. But what we always say is that when reconnaissance planes are involved, their readings and measurements come before our satellite estimates and before anyone's satellite estimates, because that is actual raw data and not an estimate. So the recon data and any surface observations, of course, take precedence. So if they do get anything better than 152 miles per hour, we go with it.
Is there any buoy readings from the area? I just wondered
that's a good question, Michael, and it's a good one. Let's
Probably
see
has to
if I
get a
can
little
bring it
bit
up.
nearer, but we'll I don't know about that
I
one.
might have a look and
Have a
see
look.
if I can find any buoy data.
Do you
idea.
mind checking? I'm actually curious. Do you mind checking out some of Simran's eye temperature? Because it looks like it's still warming in the satellite imagery. Convection's a little bit less uniform in terms of -70-degree cloud tops around it right now. The northern side's starting to lack it a little bit, but it looks like the eye's continuing to improve. Like we've been talking about, probably ATWC was probably conservative when they posted their update on it. It's really been a surprise, outdoing its expectations, really. You know, starting to pick up a bit of speed northwest towards Osaka right now, really.
Have you seen anything on recon?
On recon for
I'm going to
lane,
that right now.
I mean, it said 936 last time on the drop zone, but that, like we talked about with Hank, that was likely just a little bit off from the center. So he was saying probably closer to 934. Minimum pressure at flight level was 931.9. They recorded flight level winds of 145 knots. So it's really on the edge there. You know, whether or not it is. They're going back in for another pass right now. I don't know if we'll get the full data for that by the time the hour is up, just because of how far the plane is away from the center. But there is a chance we get that data before the end of the hour ends and we end up the stream.
Yep, very interesting. If you've got any questions for us whilst we're on the air, send them in at any time. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and it will light up big and bright for us to talk about. I just saw one that came through as well.
I've got some news coming from one of the boys in the oh boy, yes, very funny. So this is from buoy 51004 Southeast Hawaii, located at longitude 152.52 west and latitude 17.44 north. And in the last few hours has been reporting wells of up to 6 feet in its general vicinity. And there's also buoy 51033 located at longitude 160.74 west, latitude 19.16 north, also reporting swells of about 6 feet.
All right.
What was the crack question that we got?
Wonderful. So you broke into that question to reveal that swells are 6 feet, and we expected them much higher, actually. All right. Well, there is this question. Isn't it a common pattern in the Atlantic to have one inactive season in between two hyperactive or above average seasons? For example, 2009 between 2008 and 2010. Well, explain 2004 and 5, and then we might get somewhere, but that's a coincidence, I think.
To be fair, it could, because 2005 and 2007, 2006 was a quiet year.
All right.
So that hypothesis could stand, potentially.
Not really. I don't think so.
It has potential though. With
It's happened
just,
a few
just-
times. You know, it's coincidence. You can get 2 quiet seasons in a row. You can get 3 or 4 quiet seasons in a row.
Correlation and causation are 2 different things. We should keep that in mind.
And then you can get 3 or 4 active seasons in a row as well.
Because,
And that's that's less likely.
It only takes 1 storm to make a season an active one. So, whether or not there's like 9 to 17, it only really needs 1. So talking about oscillations like that, it's really more correlation than anything else. But keep in mind total storms, it shouldn't really matter as much as the storms that impact land. Here's
another quick look at Cimarron right now. And this is... Let's see what the eye temperature is on that. That is now 12 Celsius on that eye. But the northern eye wall is looking a bit detached and open there. But it's really consolidating, and I would call that... It's very close. Maybe low range category 3 by now.
I've managed to get some more buoy data. But at the moment, the buoys aren't... I don't believe they're actually in the storms. Actually, within the storm yet. They're only just in the outer spiral bands.
Have a look at the western one. 10.7. 10'7".
Got one reporting at 7.5 foot in significant wave height, which is station 51002, located at 17.037 north, 157.696 west, which is reporting of a significant wave height of 7.5 feet and with atmospheric pressure at 29.94 inches.
David, what are we looking at now?
International Space Station is tracking up into the Westpac, where we have Cimarron and Sulik.
So this passes through over the atmosphere, generally in the same area. It makes an orbit of the Earth every 90 minutes, and we'll wait and see whether it captures anything from the Typhoons as it enters the light. We've not actually seen any visible imagery of these storms yet. I know it must be out there by now. I've not had the time to get to it. In fact, I believe I've got an image now. So as we wait to see on that imagery there, we'll just briefly toss it away to this image here. You can see the storms as they look on the satellite visibly. That's the latest image. Interesting. And let's see if we see anything on the International Space Station as it moves through. It looks like that path will take it very close to Sulik. I think it will miss Cimarron.
And on the screen for our viewers is the tracker, and it's probably going to fly over Cimarron, and you can see the yellow there, the future.
No, it's
path.
going to miss Cimarron. It will fly over the southern half of Sulik. You should be able to see it if it's pointing forwards.
Yeah. Let's see. Also, I wanted to bring up quickly the poll that you posted the hour ago about whether or not people think we'll get to 12 named storms this year. There's over 100 votes right now, so it's pretty nice to see the participation. 70% are saying yes right now.
So it's been pretty steady there since the last half hour or so. Around 70% of you think we will get to 12 named storms. I mean, it would be a really drab season if it didn't, but that is the long-term average. But people are so used to seeing more than 12 now, and you have to say it's hardly been a show for the Atlantic so far this season.
No, it really hasn't.
So the International Space Station is approaching Sulik, we believe. I don't believe that. I don't know yet. Might that be part of the storm? It's difficult to see.
It looks like it to me.
Is that the right-hand side? I think you can actually see the eye.
No. It's not going to be over there. It's going to be on the left.
I can see something.
Or Cimarron.
typhoon
On the
like on the
right.
left.
You won't see
It's
Cimarron on that
central
imagery.
left. There's something that looks vaguely typhoon-like near on the left.
Could you imagine Michael being a wildlife commentator?
Here we see a
Well,
wild
there's plenty of
typhoon.
wildlife YouTube channels we could.
Don't go there.
No, we're not going that far.
You
Make
could
it
just.
stop now.
I'd just make a very good David Attenborough, wouldn't I?
But for our viewers and having.
If that's Sulik, it looks horribly disorganized. I'm still not convinced.
I think that is Sulik.
Simon!
No, you won't see Cimarron on that imagery. It's going nowhere near.
It's going to the west of it.
By some distance. No, I don't think that's...
Right, there you are.
That's
Yeah.
definitely gonna be Sulik.
There's a track.
Yeah.
That's Sulik for sure.
And we're looking
So-
at.
No, it's not Sulik. It's nothing at the minute.
Well, the next path.
No, keep it...
No, right there on the left side. I swear.
Well, where's its eye?
It's like there in the center.
It's not. It's not.
No,
What is
no.
that?
Well,
What is
looks
that? You tell
like-
me.
It's a bunch of clouds by the looks of things.
What?
Right, what's that in the
Sulik's-
distance?
It could be. It could be. Sulik's still yet to come.
That's true.
Oh my goodness, we are.
But for our viewers, I am recording.
Well, that makes it all the greater for Seth
Very,
and Michael.
very professional, guys. Very professional.
We are great storm spotters. We should definitely fly out to Hawaii right now.
Yeah, no. But this is
And
live
Norway
from the
tracking.
International
Give it a
Space
couple
Station.
minutes, mate. It's coming up.
Live from the International Space Station,
I
this
think-
is the latest, and it looks like Sulik appearing on the very edge of the globe now.
Oh,
I think that is Sulik coming into view now. You can actually see the clockwise. So
Just
go on.
Counterclockwise.
just going back to Lane. I've
You've
just
picked a
also
bit of a
checked
bad
Lane.
time.
oh, jumping all over
Circular.
the place.
But no, just
Oh,
saying that the outer spiral bands are now affecting Hawaii. Just to deliver that update.
I wouldn't say
Nathan.
that's the case.
No,
A
they're
very
still off.
peripheral high altitude band is just reaching the coast of the Big Island now. We'll get a visible on that shortly after we've looked at this. That is definitely Sulik appearing on the satellite on
Nathan,
the
look, sorry.
There it is.
International
Look
Space
at the
Station.
outer bands.
Yeah, we're seeing it.
It's a pretty broad system. It's very extensive. at this point.
Jeez. There it is. So we've got it.
Ragged Eye, not doing.
It
too
is.
good.
Cimarron is just
Beautiful.
off shot to the right hand side.
Yep. So we've got Sulik again.
Yeah, there it is. This will probably be uploaded to the channel later, so you guys can.
Yeah,
Watch this
including
again if
the
you want.
mess at the beginning when you guys thought it was there.
No, just cut that.
Well, I can put that in the video. I could put that in the update.
Sure you will. All right. Well, there it is.
Oh, so
Let's see what we can, if there's any observations we can make as it does pass over there.
You can see a dry air slot kind of fitting into it a little bit.
what side, mate?
It's almost like the
Uh,
Saturn's discs.
I don't know. It's more visible in infrared. I can't really describe which side of the storm it is because this is like sideways.
That is the
Oh,
western
beautiful.
side coming. Well, it's coming from the southwest, going northeast.
Yep.
Okay, so the southern side kind of has a bit of, or southeast side kind of has like a dry air protrusion getting into it. I don't know how visible that is on the visible. You kind of can see it a tiny bit.
It's more visible on that imagery there. You're talking about the area near the eye.
Yeah. There's a bit of protrusion going in from the south and southeast side. Kind of a break in the convection a little bit. Cloud tops are still in there, but there isn't heavy convection. There's no minus 50 or below
Yeah.
temperatures at that point.
You can definitely see those indentations there on the southern side of the eye. You can also see it on the visible. I don't want to cross over to the visible just yet, just so that everyone can see this. But again, you can see the eye there. It's more pronounced on there than it is on the satellite imagery, let's say.
There's still some areas, though, where you have really heavy cloud tops, though. I don't know, you can see a little bit of them at the southern side. You see a little bit of flare-ups a tiny bit.
And now as it heads towards the eastern side, you may be able to make out the landmass of Japan and maybe South Korea just off the left-hand side.
No, just watching this, the live feed, it is just very mesmerizing to watch. It just it's we're looking at also making observations from some passing over. That's Sulik, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sulik.
Is that it? Does look. It looks like there's something getting into the outflow. Did you say that was coming from the southeast, going up through to the northwest?
South-southeast, coming up northwards into the eye. A bit of a crack.
Yeah, there's something that's getting in there. So I don't know if that's gonna weaken the storm somewhat.
The landmass of Japan is underneath that area now. That sort of residual band there on the outer edge that we're looking at there, that is over Shikoku right now.
Yeah. Someone's asking if we consider Lane's path to be rare at all.
Well, it reminds you a little bit of Iniki, doesn't it?
I don't know,
Reminds me a little
you don't
bit.
usually see storms get to Hawaii from
A
the eastern
wannabe Iniki. Wannabe.
You don't usually see storms get towards Hawaii, especially because it's a small island in a really big ocean. Also, a bit less so to see it come from the south upwards, turning to the north to impact it as well. If you see a storm impacting Kauai, you'll typically see it move westward from the eastern Pacific into it. You won't see it moving west and then take a north turn most of the time.
So that was the International Space Station. This is how it looks on the visible satellite at the minute. That's Sulik first of all, and you can see how it's been progressing, moving over to Cimarron. There it is, with its eye becoming more well defined as well, and we have to move halfway across the world to find, okay, we've ended up in America. I don't know how that happened. To find Hawaii, to find Lane. There it is. There it was. There's a look at Lane, the latest imagery there. That is on the very edge of the Himawari band.
Yeah, the reconnaissance currently is heading right into Lane as we speak. So.
Alright, so we'll get
yeah,
news on
someone's
that.
saying, do we think on recon data with the highest wind of 150 knots is Lane a Cat 5? That was a suspect reading, so that's definitely not going to be true, especially because maximum flight level winds were 145 knots, and surface winds are always lower than that, so definitely not a Category 5 if it was based on that reading alone. It really depends on the next recon pass right now. It's been borderline. SATOP says it isn't, though. Central Pacific Hurricane Center says it isn't yet.
Do you know when they might?
If we
Do
get
you know when they might get an update on the reconnaissance?
Recon is approaching.
Yeah,
from
we
the
gotta
southwest
cut
side now.
in, David.
Nathan, just sighted on the Joint Typhoon
That's a
warning
big
center.
one.
Yeah, a magnitude 7.4, 10.4 degrees north, 62.7 degrees west, near the near coast of Venezuela.
Just Venezuela. Just off the coast of Venezuela. So 10.4 north, 62.7 west.
I think we have to call Marcel and make sure he's okay.
No, that's Colombia.
A magnitude 6.7, a magnitude 7.
So that earthquake, which we're also looking at now, that occurred nearly 2 hours, nearly 1 hour ago. Not even an hour has passed.
Yeah, I saw the reports
since
on it popping up on my phone.
that earthquake. That has occurred just on the coastline, actually. What's the depth of that earthquake, David? Do we know?
86 kilometers, or 54
No,
miles.
No, wait, hold on.
No, sorry.
That's a different one.
That's a different one. Apology for this.
Someone else will have to let us know that that information's not on there. But that earthquake has occurred It's actually very close to Trinidad as well, 82 miles from the capital port of Spain. In Venezuela, it's occurred 41 miles east-southeast of Carupano, and from the capital, Caracas, some distance away from there. To give people reference, though, 279 miles east.
Yep. The depth was 123.2 kilometers.
Okay, quite a deep one.
Can you repeat what the location of the Venezuelan earthquake was?
So I'm going to cut in the Daily Mail. I think this is when UK tsunami alert issued in the Caribbean.
Interesting to note.
Fortunately, it was a deeper tsunami, or not a tsunami, earthquake.
Okay, I'm just not so sure there'll be much of a tsunami. I don't know yet. We'll have to reserve judgment on that.
I'll keep an eye on the buoy map because there is an alert for tsunami station in event mode. So I'll wait and see if anything starts to flash up at me.
Channel News Asia is also reporting magnitude 7.3.
US Gov says 7.3 as well. So it's about 7.3, 7.4. It's fortunate though, it's pretty deep down, so impact's probably less minimal. That decreases the risk for a tsunami.
Weather Nation, Weather Nation is reporting on Trinidad major earthquake, evacuations of severe buildings in Caracas.
Yeah, there you see, there's the government map. It happened just off the coast of Sucre, the Sucre province.
And the Weather Channel's also reporting it. No, I've got it on screen, Nathan. Just the location.
Yes, so have I.
All right. Yep, you've got it right.
So that's a 7.3 earthquake at present. Who knows whether that number will be revised. So that's the latest tonight. We've got 3 significant tropical cyclones, and we've also got an earthquake now as well.
We have a viewer from Colombia saying he felt it there. I'm gonna message Marcel, see what he has to say about it. Says he's offline, so we probably won't get a response during the stream, but I'm interested to find out what he thinks.
I'm just trying to find out something from a station that's reported recent movement, which is station 42060 in the Caribbean Valley, which is 63 nautical miles west-southwest of Montserrat, located at 16.387 north, 63.350 west. Is that at the moment, there is nothing reporting from it, although there is an image that has come from it, and it's looking like the sea out there is a bit choppy, but I don't know if there's anything that is a small top, but that's the latest photos that I have managed to find from the National Data Buoy Center, which the photo was taken at 2110 UTC.
The USGS service, it was a magnitude 7, and the survey service upgraded to magnitude 7.3.
We're looking at the shake map here from the USGS as well of this earthquake. Generally, it's towards the instrumental intensity 6 or 7. So potential damage as a general rule of thumb when you're talking about these things, light to moderate near the epicenter. So, you know, this one could have been a lot worse given the magnitude. It's the depth that's really you know, halted any what we expect will be significant amounts of major damage. Hopefully that will not have occurred here. But if anyone is... I know we had a lot of people following us during Tropical Storm Brett last year from Trinidad and Tobago, so if anyone happens to be watching from there, please let us know what conditions were like there, because they experienced the earthquake quite significantly as well. So we're covering this as well as the hurricane and typhoons that are currently active. It's a very busy evening that we've got here. It's currently ticked over to 10:30 p.m. UTC of the various time zones elsewhere. Over in Venezuela, what time would it be there? Is that 5 hours behind, I assume? Maybe 4. So it's getting towards the evening there. And of course, it's early in the morning in Asia, where we've been following the typhoon situation. So we've had all sorts of things happen in this hour. The International Space Station passed over Typhoon Sulik earlier, and we have the latest view of everything that's going on. That's what the weather looks like in that area. And there is Hurricane Lane. Hurricane watches are in effect for parts of Hawaii, the Big Island, extending to those other islands as well, Maui, and the 3 others, Molokai, not quite to Oahu just yet. That's what the weather looks like over there. Pretty quiet ahead of the hurricane, and then you've got the 2 typhoons closing in on East Asia as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of typhoons, Sulik's eye is getting less and less symmetrical in recent frames as well. Getting slowly clouded over as well. I know, even though banding hasn't been the best, the eye's been warm most of the time. It looks like that's starting to change a bit. Dryer's starting to protrude into it a little bit. Definitely on a weakening trend at this point, really.
Which one are we talking about?
Sulik.
Sulik, yes. What are your latest observations on Hurricane Lane?
I mean, looking at the satellite imagery, it's maintaining a solid ring of negative 70 degree cloud tops around the eye. Eye is very symmetric. It's very circular at this point in time. I'm really waiting before I say anything definitively for the recon pass, which might happen before the end of the stream and might not happen before the end of the stream. We're really going to have to wait and see. But if anything happens with it that happens after the stream, we're definitely going to post about it in the community tab and on the Discord. It's still looking very impressive. It's still a borderline Category 5. It might be, but, you know, can't really claim anything like that without having recon data with us to back it up or not.
Alright, let's take some questions. Is Hurricane Lane going to stop the eruption of Kilauea? No.
I don't think that's how it works. That's not how it works.
Not how it works. How many possible typhoons and hurricanes do we have in the next couple of weeks?
Well, if you look at the long-range models, it looks likely at this point, if you look at the models that 92W will develop, just not in the next couple of days. GFS Euro, most major models pick up on it. It's already designated by the JDWC as well. In terms of the Eastern Pacific, probably nothing in the next week or so, but the models are trying to pick up on something beyond a week developing. And same thing with the Atlantic right now, not much looking out until at least the start of September. Okay, I just saw a question I want to answer. But...
Yeah, there's been plenty more questions. I just want to go through one here about an aftershock, whether there is going to be one.
I think, I'm not an expert. Normally, you do get aftershocks, very strong. We only have to look at the magnitude 8.2. I think it was 3-4 days ago. And I think there were about 4 aftershocks above magnitude 6.
Yep. I have a couple Colombia questions. I mean, these are kind of really... Someone's asking if Marcel's been deported. The answer to that is no, but relating to that, someone asked if the earthquake could be felt in Colombia, and I messaged Marcel asking how he's doing. He said he didn't feel the earthquake, but he said his dad felt the earthquake in Colombia, so I know this person also said it was felt in Colombia by himself.
There you go.
So, yes, the earthquake could be felt in Colombia. Marcelo has responded with lots of yee saying he's fine. So I think the answer to those questions in order is no and yes.
Those are the estimated economic losses from this. It's computed through USGS. They have all sorts of algorithms, I assume. 35% chance it caused between 10 and 100 million US dollars of damage. So there is the potential there for it to be quite a substantial earthquake that's occurred. Its epicenter, where exactly? 20 kilometers north-northwest of Yaguaraparo, Venezuela.
Just sharing, got satellite imagery from Lane. The latest frame is now through as of 2200 UTC. It looks as though, if I play the loop, that in the last frame or two, it's looking like it might be starting to make its curve. It's not fully turning yet, but it's making those hinting signs now.
Oh yeah, it's already moving west-northwest. It's not moving due west anymore. It's been doing that for probably at least the past few hours at this point in time.
No, it's looking like it might be getting ready to sort of make a transition more northwest. Because in the last frame, there is a slight collapse.
You know something?
On the western side.
I remember us having probably an identical conversation when we were first tracking Hurricane Matthew at its peak. It's so many. You know, it was about to make a northward turn as well, and it was jogging all over the place, if you remember.
All right, hopefully Devin doesn't hear about this.
Let's hope Lane doesn't do that.
Speaking of that, recon, it looks like we might be able to get the eye pass during the stream. Recon's close enough to where it's getting the hurricane force winds now, at least at flight level, so we should see an eye pass during the stream within the next 10 minutes or so. So we will be able to cover that.
Wasn't the storm actually that sort of danced around? Wasn't that Joaquin?
In the Bahamas, yes.
But I can't remember Matthew dancing around.
You know, when Matthew, just after Matthew peaked, and it was really,
it stalled
didn't
for
really
a
know
few
where
hours,
it was going.
Almost a day.
Oh yeah, actually, I think
that's simmering on the satellite imagery there.
That one is
now it's Sulik.
That's Sulik.
Its eye is starting to capitulate, it seems.
Yeah, it's looking like it's starting to collapse in on itself.
And if you still want to take part in our poll, you've got about 20 minutes on that. Will the Atlantic reach 12 named storms this year? You can access our community tab to vote on that if you haven't already. So far, after 133 votes, it's 68% yes, 32% no.
And someone said, I'm assuming you'll be streaming till the top of the hour. Yes, we will be streaming until the top of the hour, until 0 UTC.
23 UTC as it is.
I'd like to just, you know, it's been a lot of support today. This is probably the most active stream we've seen in a really long time. So
you'll make Strat giddy if everyone keeps watching.
You do.
So to reiterate the news that we've got right now, there's a lot to keep on top of at the minute. So we've got the Typhoon activity that's currently ongoing. Typhoon Sulik is a strong Category 2 storm, just shy of Category 3 status. It's going to move towards the Korean Peninsula over the next 24 to 48 hours. It will make landfall, and then it could still be a typhoon by the time it does make landfall there. A preliminary typhoon warning is in effect for the southwestern part of Korea. And then you've got Cimarron there, which is intensifying and could really be the shock if it continues to look that way. It's looking very good indeed. Could be on its way to Category 4 status, but let's not get there just yet. It's still not reached Category 3 according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. We'll see what happens with that one. And we've got Hurricane Lane, which is approaching Hawaii, is going to start to make that turn very soon if it hasn't started already. Hurricane Watch is in effect on that one, and to reiterate the news that happened about an hour ago, it happened, the earthquake 7.3 occurring at 20 kilometers north-northwest of Yaguaraparo, Venezuela. And there's another look at the shake map showing that earthquake where the epicenter is in relation to Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, which will have also felt it quite substantially. If you've got any news from those areas, please let us know on the stream. We'll relay it. So with another 20 minutes left before we finish up here, where would you like to go next, guys?
I'd like just to talk about a little bit about Sulik briefly and its track. I'll do a quick screen share. I know right now, track, if I pull it up very quickly, and I'll start a screen share right here. It's still shifted. It's still continuing to shift west over the past day. Like I said in the past hour yesterday, when we were streaming it, the JTWC predicted a landfall on Jeju Island. That shifted west. Now it looks like the storm's going to go directly over Seoul. Interesting to note, some of the models, especially the Euro, are keen on taking this thing even further west. This is the European model 12Z. It actually has it go through around the North Korean border or make landfall fully in North Korea. So it's interesting to see, you know, if I go back to this, the cone is still pretty wide. It's almost certainly not going to go east of the forecast, though. But it shows that things are still pretty uncertain with this right now. And interestingly, it's going to approach Vladivostok as a post-tropical system, most likely.
Most definitely.
You don't usually see systems up there, really, that come in from the Western Pacific. So, interesting to see a Russian port be hit by a potentially tropical or post-tropical system.
So there it is, and that forecast is pretty much set in stone, as we said in the first hour.
Yeah, and then Cimarron as well, its track is maintained, or at least the forecast has remained pretty similar for the past day. A landfall on Osaka is likely as a typhoon. Although you can't argue it's stronger than what the JTWC is saying it is right now. It's looking very impressive on satellite imagery. Maybe going a bit conservative with it. A bit weaker on the north side still, but it's looking very impressive. It's unexpectedly strengthened beyond what the original forecast was saying it would be. It's kind of found this pocket that I talked about in the previous hour of lower shear that it's in between these two areas of high wind shear.
Cool.
And it's kind of been threading the needle over the past day or so with that, to maintain and intensify further than it already has.
Look at that, that really is against the odds there.
Yeah, if you look at, it's easier to tell a shear tendency. This is what it's like in the shear tendency map mode. You kind of have it really in an area of not really that favorable wind shear, but not unfavorable either, and pretty extreme on the east side and strong on the west side as well. So it's kind of fighting against the odds there to find this nice little pocket that it's had to intensify pretty quickly. And if you go towards Lane, you know, we've been talking about how it's going to start a weakening trend soon, probably. Here's Lane right now. If it's going to become a Category 5, this is its only chance. You see the wind shear straight to the north of it, heavily increasing.
I think it's got a little bit more time as you, a little bit more
it's got
time than
maybe
you
a day
make
or
out
so
there.
before it encounters the less hostile conditions, maybe. Once you get towards the reds, then you're not. Then that's when you start to encounter problems. It's in that.
Hold on. Have we got any news from any recon planes? We need to know that.
Let me take a look at this quickly. Recon.
David. Okay.
This is it right here. It looks like it's about to cross the center. Probably
All right.
for the next 5 minutes.
We'll hold the next 5 minutes. David, go ahead.
Nathan, I think the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre has updated their information on what is it, Sulik and Cimarron.
Right.
It's sorry, I'm just looking at the 23 degrees north, 141.3 degrees east. They have it at 90 knots, gusting 110. And 108 nautical miles south of Iwatu, Japan, tracking northwest at 17 knots, and I think it's picked up the speed, but very slightly.
forward motion.
Forward motion.
Yeah.
Oh,
And how about those islands, those small islands off Japan there, Iroto in particular? Sulik was pretty close to those islands, and now's another one drawing very near indeed.
I'm just going to bring the screen share up, and I'll show you the track.
Apparently, Norway Tracking is asking, where can I find satellite imagery prior to 2006?
I got no idea.
I don't either.
I think I know this is a bit different, but while we're waiting for the imagery, something interesting to
Recon.
note with Lane
We
in terms of its current movement is that it's slowed down a bit, which, you know, the slower it moves,
Strat.
we talked about a few days ago, the easier it is for it to move north. Yeah, what is it?
recon a new recon pass just went in, and they found a pressure of unconfirmed 925.4 millibars, but that's flight level.
That's flight
And they've
level,
also
so
found, yeah, and they've also found still 137 knot flight level winds too.
they found 145 knot, or a little bit above that flight level winds on the northeast side. If we get a drop zone into the center, it'll likely be around 929 or 930 millibars. So the storm's still intensifying.
We have news of another earthquake. A 6.5 has occurred near Vanuatu.
I'm bad with that geography. Where's Vanuatu? Western Pacific?
The South Pacific.
Southern.
David,
South Pacific.
any news for
Close
us?
to me.
Any news for us over there?
Just checking.
Okay, that's perfect time because someone just asked about that right as you brought it up, so it's nice to see. But if we look at the recon update, there might be a chance that this is a Category 5 now. The storm could be below 930 millibars. That would be an over 10 millibar drop since we started live streaming today. So pretty quick improvement in terms of the pressure of the system. It was 950 millibars earlier today, dropped down significantly. Yep.
Strongest shadow earthquake just north of Abram Island in Vanuatu. Magnitude 6.7 at around 6 miles or 10 kilometers deep. And quickly going straight, I'll just check the Vanuatu weather office.
Yeah, I want to try to pull up an image quickly of where this earthquake was exactly, just so we can get a better look at it on the map. Gotta go out here though.
So
Okay,
to
here it is
reiterate,
right here.
2 earthquakes now. A 7.3 on the coast of Venezuela and a 6.5 now somewhere
you'll
in the Vanuatu region. And has someone got an image of that?
I have it right here. You'll pull it up. This is the map right now. It was only 10 kilometers deep, so it was a very shallow earthquake as well. So I think
Shallow,
tsunami.
large, and in the land areas there.
So I think tsunami might be something to worry about with this one. It was very shallow. To put it in perspective, it was over 10 times more shallow, closer to the surface than
Yeah.
the 7.3 earthquake in Colombia.
And that's not too far from the capital, Port Vila, either.
No,
To the north.
to the north of it.
I'm trying to speak. The latest recon data shows that so far as I saw, the pressure hangs around 926 millibars.
Yeah, we just talked about it.
Okay, I guess I missed that one then.
Yeah, we're talking about the new earthquake in Vanuatu right now.
Oh dear. What intensity is it?
6.7,
6.7.
only 10 kilometers below the surface, though.
Oh man, that's shallow.
Yeah, so this one definitely could be a little larger threat in terms of tsunamis for coastal regions, Solomon Islands, Fiji, New Caledonia as well. So I'm pretty interested to see what reports come out about this one as well. It also occurred very close to land as well, just offshore. I'm going to turn off my screen share for now.
Alright then, well, this is the JMA's website that you've caught me looking at. They've just put out updates on the storms as well. Typhoon Sulik, you can't see half of the screen there unfortunately, but they're saying for Sulik 950 millibars, wind at 85 knots. I don't know if that's 10 minutes sustained or 1 minute. And Cimarron, they say, is weaker. I think it's the other way round by now.
They say it's weaker.
Weaker than Sulik.
No, it's... I mean, if you were looking at satellite imagery, you'd definitely assume Cimarron was stronger.
Yeah, you would, and I think that's right.
What are they saying Cimarron's at?
They're saying Cimarron is at 75 knots and a pressure of 965 millibars. Well, you look at them there, and I think it's pretty much no contest that Cimarron, the one on the right-hand side, is stronger, although Sulik is larger.
Yeah, the eye's starting to round out more with Cimarron as well in the latest couple of frames as well, so over the past hour and a half. So that could be a further sign of intensification. The north side of Cimarron's still a bit weak. It looks like it's starting to try to wrap around a bit more, though it's not clear at this point. Eye still looks to be in the positives in terms of temperature, so definitely a sign of a strong system.
David, anything for us at this time?
The Australian Government Bureau Meteorology Tsunami Warning Centre, they've put out a posting at 8:44 local time.
Saying there's no tsunami threat to Australia.
Yeah, magnitude 6.5 they have, and nothing showing up on the Vanuatu Weather Office website at this point in time.
Alright, well there we are. Does anyone have any news from the Venezuelan earthquake? If you've just joined us, a 7.3 earthquake occurred in Venezuela not so long ago. Just an hour and a half ago. We started reporting on it in the last 20 to 30 minutes. 7.3 the magnitude. Along the coast of Venezuela, apparently was felt in Bogota, Colombia. Which is quite some distance away from the epicenter of that earthquake. Let's see, what's that distance? If that is true, then that's 877 miles. Strat.
Yeah, I was going to say we have some first-hand witness information from it. We have someone in chat saying they're from Bogota, saying they felt it. And then our friend Marcel Holos said that, and he also lives in Bogota, said that his dad felt the earthquake, and that so we have, it's probably nothing really strong, maybe just a tremor there, but for an earthquake that deep, it was over 120 kilometers deep to be felt that far away. It's pretty impressive.
And just following on from Strat, The Australian, which is our national paper over here in Australia, is also providing coverage. A local firefighter captain in Caracas said there was no initial reports of injuries or major damage in the capital.
And you're also looking at a report from Cumana there, which is 100 miles from the earthquake, saying that there are initial reports of several injuries at a shopping centre.
Shopping centre, yep, where an escalator fell.
But no immediate signs of damage in the vicinity. So that's the area of Cumana. There aren't that many large population centres close to the epicenter of that earthquake. I just caught. Let me try and find something here. Go ahead.
Marcel, the Colombia's capital, also felt it, and so that confirms what Marcel said. Residents fled from their buildings and homes. The confusing moments after the quake were captured on state television.
41 miles from the city of Carapano, that's a population of roughly 112,000. That is the most significant place by the looks of things, as well as Maturin, 411,000. I'm not sure where exactly that one is. That's more inland. That is roughly 56 miles further inland from where the earthquake occurred. So about 500,000, half a million people at significant risk from this one. I should think that the millions who will have felt this earthquake elsewhere will have had much lesser repercussions from this earthquake.
Just going to reinforce the latest updates on the storms, Nathan.
We're about to finish, so go ahead.
As we come to the top of the hour, we've the latest updates that have come through from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. Hurricane Lane is currently located at 14.3 degrees north, 153.2 degrees west. Currently with maximum sustained winds of 155 miles per hour, just shy of a Category 5 status. Currently moving west-northwest at 9 miles an hour with a central minimum air pressure of 941 millibars.
This is 2 hours ago, right?
Yeah, this is as of 1800 UT. This is the latest update as of 1800 UTC.
And the next update coming up in an hour, but we won't be here for that.
The storm may be at least 10 millibars deeper than that right now.
Yeah, it's possible. So that's the latest official update that we've got. On to Typhoon Cimarron, which is currently located at 23.0 degrees north, 141.3 degrees east, as of the latest update at 2100 UTC. 1800 UTC. With 90 knots of wind and expected possibly to intensify to 100 knots. Just on to Category 3, if I'm right. Possibly moving on to the mainland Japan, possibly also skirting the coast.
Definitely.
Of one of the islands. I don't know if it's skirting one of the coasts or if it's actually going to make landfall. And then you've got Typhoon Sulik, which is expected to curve round and possibly make landfall near the border region of South and North Korea.
Depending on which model you go by, one or two are calling for a bit further south.
But yeah, it's expected landfall is possibly a tropical storm. Although on approach it will still be a typhoon, which may still pack quite a big punch for the area, given with the approaching storm surge and then also subsequent landfall. There is still the possibility of some significant weather event there. Sulik's current location at 29.8 degrees north, 121.7 degrees east.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone else for joining us this evening. We're finishing up now. To reiterate, those earthquakes that have occurred, a 7.3 off the coast of Venezuela and a 6.5 at Vanuatu in the last hour and a half. We've also got Typhoon Sulik, as mentioned, Cimarron and Hurricane Lane headed for Hawaii. Force 13 will continue updates throughout the next 24 hours from our team, but for our live coverage tonight, that is the conclusion for now. Thank you very much for joining us and supporting the channel, and we hope that you'll stick around for our next updates as we continue throughout the next few days. It's such a busy time of year, isn't it? Well, we'll see you again soon.
Yes.
David.
Take care, everyone.
David, were you going to say something quickly?
And I'm showing the Southern Hemisphere. It's 2018-19 season, November 1st.
Steady on. Good night, Strat, and thank you for joining us, Michael, and Orlando, who's still there, muted somewhere as well. Good night.
It's been good.